Okay, here is a quick debunking of the popular narrative about what happened in Iran in 1953. The Disney version is that there was a popular prime minister, democratically elected in Iran, and he nationalized the oil sector. So the big, bad, greedy CIA staged a coup, removed that noble prime minister, and installed a puppet dictator, the Shah of Iran. Let's debunk those. So let's start with the nationalization of the oil sector. It sounds like a good idea, right? The oil should belong to the nation, and there should not be any colonialism or imperialism. But the reality of what happened was that when the oil sector was nationalized in 1951, in the next 2.5 years, the oil production in Iran fell 96%. Basically, it came to a standstill. Why? Because the Iranians did not have the skills, the technical knowledge, and the expertise to drill oil, to refine it, to export it, and so on. And as for the British, who were in charge of the oil industry before, they did not suffer much because they just increased their production in the other joint ventures they had in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq. So it was not a big loss for the British, but it was a huge, devastating loss for Iran. So Mossadegh was not a very smart guy. And as for him being popular or democratically elected, there are a lot of fine prints. Okay. So, first of all, this was a parliamentary system. So you had all these ministers running in their own districts. They get elected just from that district. Okay, so Mossadegh never ran in a national election. He ran from one district in Tehran, and he got 30,000 votes in 1950. And that was 0.2% of Iran's population. So he was not a popular leader. Okay, he was just from one small district, and he was very manipulative, dangerous, and power hungry. So the way he became the prime minister in 1951 was this. At that time, in 1951, uh, Mossadegh started to talk about nationalization of the oil, which is a very populist position. And obviously, a lot of people, regular people, thought it would be great. But the Shah and the then Prime Minister opposed this idea because they were smart and they knew that nationalization would be a disaster. So, guess what happened to that Prime Minister? He got assassinated by an Islamic terrorist group known as Fedayeen-e-Islam. And that group was a partner of Mossadegh's party, which was called National Front. So, in all likelihood, basically, Mossadegh murdered a prime minister and came to power. And then 1 year later, it was such a disaster that the whole country's economy was suffering. So in 1952, he asked, there was another election. They had elections every 2 years. And in the 1952 election, Mossadegh stopped counting the votes because he knew that his party was only popular in the big cities and not in the rural areas. So he stopped counting of the votes, and the parliament, 40% of the parliament were actually empty seats. There were no representatives. So, in this diminished parliament, he gave himself dictatorial powers for 6 months. Okay, so for 6 months, he could pass any law he wanted. So he was a real dictator. He had far more power than the Shah. And when the Shah tried to remove him in 1952, which he had the power to do, because according to the Iran's constitution, the Shah could uh, fire the prime minister at any point. So when the Shah fired Mossadegh in 1952, Mossadegh created huge riots in Tehran. So the Shah was scared and he rehired Mossadegh as the prime minister, who now had dictatorial powers for 6 months. Okay. So at the end of the 6 months, what happened? None of the problems in Iran were solved. So in January 1953, Mossadegh gave himself the dictatorial powers for one more year. Okay. And then if that was not enough, in 7 months later, like in August 1953, he had a nationwide referendum to totally dissolve the parliament, which would basically make Mossadegh the supreme leader of Iran. And that referendum was so rigged that 99.9% of the voters apparently approved his idea. Okay. So that was when the CIA got involved because then the Shah uh, went to the Americans and said, hey, can you do something? Because I don't have enough power. And the life of the Shah was so threatened by Mossadegh that a lot of people said, hey, Mr. Shah, remember what happened to the prime minister in 1951? The same thing is going to happen to you. Mossadegh is going to assassinate you with the help of the terrorist groups. So the Shah actually fled the country. He went to Italy. And then that's when the CIA they took a page out of Mossadegh's playbook. So remember how Mossadegh got people to riot and force the Shah to rehire him? Well, the CIA did the same. They hired mobs, they went to the military, they bribed some of the mullahs. So then there was a rent a riot mob in Tehran, and then the military took their tanks and they went to the house of Mossadegh and they took him in. And then that was the end of Mossadegh. And then he spent the rest of his life in house arrest. Okay, so that's a summary. So the summary was that the nationalization of oil was a disaster. From 1951 to 1953, the oil production fell 96%, and Mossadegh was not a good guy. He came to power by assassinating the previous prime minister, and he bullied the Shah with riots and manipulation. He rigged the election in 1952. He rigged the referendum in 1953. So he was not a good guy. And then also, the Shah had been a Shah since 1941. Okay, so he had been a Shah for 12 years by the time the CIA, the anti-coup happened. So he was not installed by the CIA. So we could say he was saved by the CIA. And the CIA has done a lot of bad coups around the world, but this was actually one of the rare exceptions. It was a really good coup that saved Iran. Okay, so it was actually like the anti-coup. Okay, so the best way to define what the CIA did was an anti-coup. They stopped Mossadegh from uh, carrying out the coup and becoming a dictator. And then from 1953 until 1978 were the best years for Iran. Its economy grew 34 times, whopping 34 times in 25 years. And uh, Iran became the largest economy in the Middle East. It had the mightiest military in the Middle East. Its currency, real, was stable for 20 years. Its passport was widely accepted all over the world. The Shah was very popular in the West as well as the rest of the world. So that is the summary of the debunking of the popular narrative of what happened in Iran in 1953. Thank you.